On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Was it considered too dangerous to conduct, and the industry was hesitant to take this on and invest in?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Why did you take steps to mature the government's approach to biodefense?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Were there any specific lines of effort or actions you felt were needed during this time to improve the research, development, and fielding model?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How was dual use and gain of function incorporated or accounted for in maturing biodefense countermeasures?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did you ever discuss moving gain of function countermeasures research out of government space to private industry space?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How were these private organizations regulated through government oversight while conducting risky research, including gain of function or gene editing technology?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Did the Obama White House or any government entities take steps to inject funding into private industry?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
How do you ensure that our national security and public health is protected when private organizations work with foreign countries of concern and have the no government oversight, such as the Eco Health Alliance research grant you funded in a CCP military lab?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given the culture of the pay to play at NIAID, did you or anyone acting on your behalf make any payment or enter any arrangement in any way or fashion to secure influence the broad pardon you received from President Biden?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Limited to the period of your pardon, at any point between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025, did you destroy any federal record or tell anyone else to?
Under the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that you have a unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
111 times. That's how many times Dr. Anthony Fauci pled the Fifth Amendment before Congress in testimony on Wednesday. Dr. Anthony Fauci was America's leading COVID doctor for years during the first outbreak under the Trump administration and running through the Biden administration. Dr. Anthony Fauci has come under fire recently for a diary or a set of personal documentation that he took during the COVID pandemic. Now, the notes that the doctor left himself, or the love letters as his critics call them, are quite astounding because he told others and also remarked to himself many things that were not consistent with what he was telling the public at the time. So Dr. Anthony Fauci took the stage in front of the entire nation on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, and he had a quite slippery dodge for investigators who were trying to get to the bottom of whether or not he knew that he was illegally funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan laboratory in China. So Dr. Anthony Fauci, he had pled the Fifth 111 times. Now, does that bring up a question about the preemptive pardon that was issued to him by AutoPen from former President Joe Biden? Because it has not been tested in court yet, and so we don't know if it provides blanket immunity for prosecution for potential crimes that Fauci may have committed while leading the COVID pandemic response. And Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky and an ophthalmologist, he had many questions for Dr. Fauci. And quite contrary to the media characterization of Paul, this was not a hot-headed exchange between him and Fauci. It was not pure political theater. He asked many sensible and reasonable questions of Dr. Fauci, which he refused to answer. Now, the matter now proceeds to accountability for Dr. Anthony Fauci for pleading the fifth 111 times. And this could go to contempt of Congress proceedings. That's right. Under a federal statute, he can be held in contempt of Congress and slapped with a sizable fine and up to 1 year imprisonment. So therefore, if the Congress follows through and holds him in contempt, and Dr. Paul, he said that the committee was holding a vote to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress next week, then we may finally see criminal charges brought against Fauci at last. So this leads us to a major question before the American public. When will someone be held accountable for the COVID pandemic response? You could argue that according to a number of provisions in international law that there were human rights violated, including freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. There were mandates that fly in the face of bodily autonomy, which was also once recognized to be a human right. And if Dr. Anthony Fauci exaggerated the fatality rate, as he did before Congress and he did on television shows, including Hannity, a place where I used to work, then he could be in trouble because he was telling himself that the fatality rate was only about 0.2 to 0.3%, and that was about 10 times lower than what he was saying in public. And that's just one of a number of things, including his coordination with scientific researchers who cast doubt on the lab origins hypothesis and instead pointed them in the direction of a wet market theory that has later been discredited quite broadly. And there are a number of federal agencies, including the Department of Energy and the FBI, that lean towards the lab leak hypothesis. Now, one of the things that Dr. Paul brought up in the hearing was that there was evidence of a furin cleavage site technique that could have led to the SARS-CoV-2 virus being formed in a laboratory. There was research at the University of North Carolina, for example, Dr. Ralph Becker, and the cleavage sites, according to documentation that doesn't come from me, comes from scientific experts who have examined it, believe that this is a strong possibility of the formation of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So there are a lot of things that indicate that Dr. Fauci knew that the Wuhan laboratory was engaging in gain-of-function research. It was illegal to do that at the time, and he had a presidential immunity granted to him by an auto-pen pardon that extended back to 2014. Now, why 2014? That's when a lot of this type of research began. And it is quite alarming that this pandemic may have been weaponized to violate our constitutional rights and to interfere in the 2020 election. And I think that's why the media is so hesitant to cover what was in the Fauci diary, let alone get into this hearing with any sort of sensible coverage that could produce public reaction that could lead to reform, that would hold elites accountable. That seems to be the furthest thing from the minds of so-called mainstream journalists or legacy media journalists. They don't seem to want to hold elites accountable. They just want to hold the Trump administration accountable. This sort of one-sided cherry picking of who gets public accountability and who does not is leading us down a very dark road. And if there is ever a time needed for the rule of law to be brought back and enforced evenly, regardless of who you are, then it is now, because Trump officials were held for contempt of Congress and for misleading Congress charges in the past under the Biden administration, and now we see a similar situation with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Will he get a get out of jail free card because he is an elite that is favored by the Democrat media complex? Well, we'll have to see about all of that, but they will be holding a criminal contempt vote next week, according to Dr. Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky. So weigh in with your thoughts about this. What should happen with Dr. Anthony Fauci? Should he be held in contempt? Should he potentially face prison time? We always appreciate hearing from you at the Becker Brief.
But he was subpoenaed here to testify, refused to answer any questions, even after being directed by the chair and being advised of the law requiring him to do so. He has cited a privilege that is unsupported because of his blanket pardon and because he waived the privilege by testifying at the start. I'm going to give you one more opportunity to comply with the law. Limited to the period of your pardon, at any point between January 1st, 2014 and January 19th, 2025, did you destroy any federal record or tell anyone else to?
Under the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Given that you have a unlimited presidential pardon, what is your specific objection that you are making?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
My question was limited to the period of your pardon only. I find your objection unsupported and direct you to answer the question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Because you refuse to answer, citing a privilege that is unsupported because of your pardon, and after being denied to do so, this committee has scheduled a vote next week on a resolution certifying your contempt.